Hello, my dear friends. This has been such an enormously difficult week for Klal Yisrael. We woke up Sunday morning to discover that 6 of the hostages were murdered by Hamas. The IDF was approaching. They were about to liberate them from the tunnels, and at the last moment, Hamas murdered in cold blood, shot them in the head with bullets, each one of the 6 hostages. And the bodies were retrieved. They were taken to Eretz Yisrael. The funeral levi's were this week. It was a national trauma within the state of Israel and the Jews in the diaspora. We as much as not the same level, but as much as possible, we felt the enormous pain and the tragedy and the trauma of this event. In particular, the trauma was for the families after going through 9 months of hoping and waiting and praying and dreaming that maybe, even though they knew that their family members, with the suffering of being held in captivity for 9 months, is indescribable, and the suffering for the families is indescribable. But there was always a glimmer of hope that maybe they'll be able to be released and go free and come back to their homes in Eretz Yisrael and return to their families. And then that at the last moment their lives were snuffed out. What tremendous pain and anguish that was. Hamas, you can't. There's no words to describe what monsters they are. The level of riches, because they went and they filmed videos before they murdered the 6 hostages. They filmed videos, and then they took those videos and they sent them to the families. Why would you do such a thing? Because they wanted to inflict as much pain as possible. The level of, I would say they're animals, but animals don't do such things. They're not humans and they're not animals. There's some type of creature that's just off the charts in terms of being evil, terrible, horrible, miserable, rishayim. And the level of pain that they inflicted is just indescribable. So I want to offer some thoughts of hopefully it's too soon maybe to say any words of nechama, but something meaningful I want to say this afternoon. First, I'm reminded of what I heard from my Rebbe Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, the Mir Rosh Yeshiva, and I've quoted this before. The Navi on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, we read the Haftarah from Yirmiyahu, and Yirmiyahu describes the following: Ko Amar Hashem, Ko Barama Nishma. God says, there's a voice on high, a bitter wailing. Rachel Mevaka Abana. Rachel's crying for her children. She can't stop crying because her children are not there. And the Chazal say that means Yaakov Avinu buried, even Rachel had died maybe 1,000 years before the Churban. But Yaakov had buried Rachel in Beis Lechem, because instead of burying her in Maras HaMachpelah, because that was the route that Klal Yisrael took when they went into Golus after the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. And he wanted that Rachel should be standing there, at least her neshama, not physically. Her neshama should be there, and she should observe the children marching into Golus, and she should cry for her children and plead with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have compassion on them. So the Navi says that God responds, Kol Mar Hashem, Mini Kolch Mibechi. God says, Rachel, refrain your voice from wailing, and your eyes from crying, because there's reward for your efforts. And the children will return from the land where they were held in captivity. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said, he was the Mir Rosh Yeshiva, he was my Rebbe, such a tremendous heart Rav Chaim had. Rav Chaim would say that he would go to Kever Rachel before Rosh Hashanah, and he would speak to Rachel Imein, he would speak to Mama Rachel, to the mother Rachel, and he spoke to her as if he felt he was standing in her presence, and he would say, Mama, the Navi says, Mini Kolach Mibechi, you should refrain yourself from crying. And I say, Nein, Mama Vein, Nein, Mama Vein, no, you should cry more, continue crying, don't refrain yourself from crying. And I could only think that Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, who was able to feel the depths of pain of anybody in Klal Yisrael. Were he alive today, the first thing he would have done is he would have ran to Kever Rachel, and he would have said, Mama, veint, Mama, cry and cry. And it's been pointed out many times by many people that the most high profile, one of the most high profile hostages was Hirsch Goldberg Poland, and his parents, John Poland and Rachel Goldberg, traveled around the world indefatigably. They left no stone unturned. They spoke to politicians around the world, hoping to influence them, that they should use their influence to have their son freed. And so Rachel Goldberg is a modern day Rachel, like Rachel Imenu crying for her children. And Rav Chaim would have said to her also, he would have said, Veint, Mama, veint, you should cry for the pain and the suffering of your child, of Hirsch Goldberg, and all the other hostages that are still in captivities, and all the other hostages that lost their lives. The voice of Rachel, her Rachel Goldberg Poland should merge and blend with the voice of Rachel Imenu as they cry for the children of Klal Yisrael. But I want to offer some words of perhaps nechama, of at least something meaningful that I want to say. Rashi understands the pasuk is talking about Rachel crying for her children, and when the pasuk says Yesh Sachar L'Pulasech, God says there's reward for your pu'ula. Pu'ula means your efforts, or that which you have done. It means there's reward for your crying, and that's why they're going to eventually return back to Eretz Yisrael. But the Radak, who's one of the classical commentators on Navi, says the pu'ula is not referring to crying. Pu'ula refers to offsprings, because the children of a person is something that a person creates. Their children, the mother brings the children into the world. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when the Navi says Yesachar L'Pulasech, it's not talking about Rachel Imenu who's crying. It's talking about the members of Klal Yisrael, that even though they went into Golus, and even though they suffered so much, still they remain loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they remain loyal to His Torah. And that's what it means. Yesachar L'Pulasech. There's a reward for your offsprings that you brought into the world. They're spiritual giants. In spite of all the suffering and the pain and the trauma, they still have remained loyal Jews, and there's a reward for them. And the reward will be that eventually B'Shavu Uvanim will go. They will return back to Eretz Yisrael. So I want to suggest that according to if you follow along those lines of the Radak, that Yesachar L'Pulasech is referring to the children of Klal Yisrael. So I want to suggest that if you look at the contrast between Klal Yisrael and the enemies of Klal Yisrael, of Hamas and all the other people around the world who are supportive of Hamas, look at the unbelievable contrast. Hamas cares 2 cents about the Palestinians. They don't care if they're murdered and they suffer, and to the contrary, the more the Palestinians suffer, the happier they are, because they could use that as leverage. They don't care 2 hoots about anybody, even if it is their own people. And the leadership of Hamas, there's absolutely no concern about the suffering of the Palestinian people. Look at the stark contrast. Klal Yisrael, none of us know. We're here in Chutz La'aretz, in Golus. We don't know the people, the hostages. We don't know we don't know the individuals. We don't know their families. Most people in Israel also don't know them. But the level of identification, of commiseration, of Klal Yisrael with the suffering of the hostages and the suffering of the families of the hostages is as extreme as the level of cruelty of Hamas is, and as extreme as the level of indifference for the plight of the Palestinian people. To the opposite extreme, that's how great is the compassion of Klal Yisrael, and therefore inherent in what the Navi says, Yesachar lepulosech, there's reward for your children. The reward is not only that your children observe the Torah in spite of the galus, but it's the reward of your children that they have such tremendous compassion and such tremendous feeling and the ability to identify even wherever the members of Klal Yisrael are. And we've been saying for the last 9 months, we've all, or it's more than 9 months, almost 11 months, we've been saying Tehillim every day with Kavanah, 3 times a day. In every shul, wherever you go, they're saying Kapitel Tehillim every day. And there's so much identification for the plight of the hostages, and the plight of their families, and the plight of the people in Israel in general who are under attack and assault. And that's the greatness of Klal Yisrael. And therefore, when the Navi says Yesachar lepulosech, it inherent in that is not only because your children, who are the Pu'ula, these are the offsprings, this is what Rachel Imenu accomplished. It's not only because they remain loyal to the Torah, but it's that they become spiritual giants. And even though they've been persecuted and tortured and suffered so much, but their level of compassion for another human being, and particularly for members of Klal Yisrael, even if it's people they don't know, the level of compassion is just unbelievable. It's light years away from the complete opposite of the level of disdain and indifference that Hamas and all the other Soni Yisrael have for human life. And we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He's the father of Klal Yisrael. Rachel is Rachel Imenu, she's the mother. But the Ribbon Shalom is Avinu Malkeinu. We're going to say that soon on Rosh Hashanah, over and over again. Avinu Malkeinu, you're our king, but you're also our father. Banim Atem Lamakom in the Parsha last week. We are children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we say to the Ribbon Shalom, Yesachar lepulosech, Ribbon Shalom, there has to be reward for your children, that they should be Vishavu Vanam L'Gvulam, that they should be able to return, to come back to Eretz Yisrael, that there should be a Geula, and that all the suffering that Klal Yisrael has lived through during the millennium and for years and years, and now the suffering is so intensified. And since the Holocaust, there's never been as much trauma as there is now. So we ask the Ribbon Shalom to fulfill that promise of Mini Kolach Mibechi. The Ribbon Shalom, he promised, he said that he told Rachel, remove the crying from your voice and the tears from your eyes, because Vishavu Vanu Gulam, Vishavu Me'eretz, they're going to return in the schus of the greatness of Klal Yisrael, the enormous capacity to identify with other Jews around the world who perhaps they don't, to identify with Jews around the world who they don't know. That's so enormous. We ask the Rebbeinu Shalom fulfill the prophecy of Vishavu L'Gvulam, that they should be able to return once again to Eretz Yisrael. Thank you for listening, and have a good Shabbos.